There she was, laughing at something the receptionist said, wearing a navy blouse, her hair pinned back like she was going to brunch, not a job interview. And suddenly, the air inside the conference room tasted like aluminum. I wasn't prepared. Not for the sound of her voice, which hadn't aged a day. Not for the way she placed her bag gently on the chair, still left-handed, still precise. Like someone would find her if she scuffed the leather. She didn't see me at first. She was looking at the water bottle, unscrewing the cap, taking a sip, sighing, the same way she used to do after a long walk home in the rain, as if life owed her dry socks and apologies. Then her eyes met mine, and nothing. No shock, no stutter, just a half-polite smile, like I was some HR nobody she'd have to charm for 15 minutes before lunch. She didn't recognize me. She didn't recognize the man she'd once promised to grow old with. The one she left with a note taped to the fridge that said, "You deserve more, Callum. I can't be your anchor anymore." Which was ironic, considering she was the one who sank me. I could hear my heart pounding. Loud. Obnoxious. Like it was trying to climb out of my throat and storm out of the room. I should have stopped the interview right there. I should have said, "Sorry, wrong fit," and walked out before the past swallowed me whole. But I didn't. Instead, I stood up, extended my hand, and said, "Let's begin, Ms. Hargrove." She froze for exactly 2 seconds. Her smile cracked, just slightly, the way porcelain does before it shatters. And then, she shook my hand like we'd never shared a bed, a mortgage, or the kind of silence that ends marriages. And the interview began. Except it wasn't an interview anymore. Not really. It was something else. A test. A trap. A reckoning. And neither of us knew who'd be walking out of that room with their dignity intact. She sat down across from me like this was any other meeting. Legs crossed. Shoulders squared. Face calm. Maybe a bit too calm. Her resume rested on the glass table between us like a landmine. And I knew if I even glanced at it too long, I'd explode. "So," I started, my voice trying too hard not to crack. "Why do you want to work here?" Classic opener. Cold. Mechanical. Safe. She didn't flinch. "It's a fresh start," she said, folding her hands. "I've been through some things, and I'm looking for stability." Through some things? Like ruining a marriage? Like blowing up a life you once said you couldn't live without? I nodded, because that's what you're supposed to do. But my nails were digging into my palms so hard, I swear I nearly left scars. "I see you were at Glassbrook Media for a year," I said, scanning the page but not really reading. I already knew what I was looking for. "What happened there?" She hesitated. "Not long. Just enough to confirm my suspicion. She wasn't here for a job. Not really. She was running. From something. Maybe someone. That stupid scarf-wearing photographer, maybe. The one she'd left me for. Restructuring," she answered carefully. "They let go of most of the creative team. Budget issues." I leaned back. "Tough break." She nodded, her eyes drifting down to her lap for the first time. Vulnerability. Was it real? Or rehearsed? I couldn't tell. That was the problem with Marla. She was always one step ahead emotionally, like she knew what you'd feel before you even did. That made her dangerous, made falling for her feel like gravity, and made being left by her feel like free falling with your eyes open. "So," I said, forcing my hands to relax, "are you comfortable working under pressure?" Her eyes snapped back to mine. She knew what I was doing. I saw it, right there in the tight corner of her jaw. "You tell me," she said. It wasn't a challenge. It was an admission. And that's when it hit me. She had recognized me. Maybe not at first. But the second I said her last name aloud, she knew. She just didn't want to be the first one to acknowledge the ghost in the room. We were both pretending. Both holding on to the illusion that this was just business. Just another applicant. Just another day in corporate hell. But I wasn't over it. Not by a long shot. The betrayal still lived in my bones. I still remembered the night I found the photos on her phone. Black and white portraits of her, half-dressed, looking like a stranger. The captions were worse. Inside jokes I wasn't part of. Whole conversations that made me realize she hadn't just cheated on me physically. She'd emotionally relocated to a place where I didn't exist. And now she was here, in my office, applying for a position on my team. I should have ended it right there. Told her we'd keep her in mind and shown her the door. But I didn't, because part of me wanted to see just how far she'd go. And another part, the worst part, wanted to know why she left that other guy. Why she was back in a city she once said she'd never return to. Why her voice, for the briefest second, cracked when she said the word stability. She wasn't just running toward this job. She was running from something. And I was going to find out exactly what, even if it destroyed us both. I remember when you hated offices, I said, more to myself than to her. She tilted her head. Excuse me. I leaned forward slightly, fingers steepled like I was reviewing something on paper, but I wasn't. I hadn't looked at a single bullet point on her resume. I was reading her, watching every blink, every pause, every attempt to breathe like I was just another stranger she'd shake hands with and forget. You used to call them soul coffins. Said you'd rather mop floors in a jazz club than sit behind a desk. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. People change. Do they? I asked, soft, almost curious. That silence between us started to throb, like the seconds themselves were begging someone to say something real. She shifted in her chair, ran a hand through her hair, then tried to disguise the discomfort with a light chuckle. I hated how familiar the gesture was, but I didn't smile back. The power dynamic had shifted without a sound, and she knew it. I let it hang for a moment longer, then casually leaned back and changed tone like we were friends catching up over coffee. So where are you living now? In town. Temporarily. She cleared her throat. I've been staying with a friend. It's a little in transition. Which told me two things. She didn't want to talk about it, and she didn't have her own place. Which, for Marla, was unthinkable. This was a woman who once cried over a chipped vase because chaos in the home meant chaos in the heart. And now she was couch surfing? No way she landed there voluntarily. I could feel her watching me for cues, for tells, for some signal I was going to toss her out or gloat or dig deeper. But I didn't need to, because the version of her sitting across from me wasn't the polished, poised woman I once chased around bookstores and art galleries. This version was fraying at the edges. Not shattered. Not yet, but worn. Let's talk about references, I said, casually flipping to the back of her resume. None listed. Just says available upon request. Can I assume that means Ethan's not picking up the phone? That hit. Her jaw clenched. Slightly. Almost imperceptibly. But I'd lived with her for 6 years. I noticed. She didn't look away, though. He's not in the picture anymore. The way she said it wasn't defensive. It wasn't even bitter. It was hollow. Like someone repeating lines from a play they no longer believed in. I almost pitied her. Almost. He fired you, didn't he? I asked, quieter now. That time she did look away. Just for a second. I left, she said, voice low. It got complicated. It always did, Marla. She had this way of stepping into people's lives like a summer storm. Beautiful, sudden, impossible to prepare for. But just as quick to vanish. Leaving broken umbrellas and flooded basements behind. I paused, the silence growing heavier again, until she finally said, I didn't know you worked here, Callum. And there it was. My name, finally in her mouth after all these years. Like a matchstick striking flint. It made something inside me recoil. I didn't want to hear it. Not from her. Not like that. Like it was nothing. Like it hadn't been soaked in years of unanswered questions. I figured, I said flatly. She nodded slowly. If I had known, you wouldn't have applied? She hesitated. No, I would have found another way. I didn't respond right away, because that part stung, even though it shouldn't have. I wasn't her enemy. I hadn't destroyed anyone. I was just the guy left behind, cleaning up the emotional debris while she posed for artsy black and white photos and posted vague quotes about growth. But now she was here, in my world, on my turf, asking me for something. And for once, I wasn't the one at the mercy of her choices. You still want the position? I asked, folding her resume in half and setting it aside like it meant nothing. She looked at me carefully. Do you want me to? I stared at her for a long moment, then said, I want to see if you can earn it. And for the first time since she walked in, Marla Hensley looked scared. She didn't speak for several seconds. Just sat there, blinking slowly, as if trying to calculate what I meant by earn it. She was smart enough to know it wasn't about her qualifications. Not anymore. This wasn't about marketing experience or Photoshop proficiency. Not after everything we just tiptoed through. No, this was personal now. The moment she said my name, confirmed she knew, the whole game shifted into something darker. Something raw. I'm not afraid of a challenge, she finally said, straightening her posture like that line might still work on me. Like I hadn't seen her crumble in silence before. Like I hadn't watched her fall apart in the doorway of our apartment once. Crying into her hands because the weight of her lies finally caught up with her. but only after I confronted her with proof. I gave her a long, unreadable look. Then I reached for a stack of test materials on the table next to me and slid one across to her. A printout of a mock branding exercise we gave to late-stage applicants, usually the final task before hiring. Most people had a week to prepare. She was getting 20 minutes. I want to see what you do with this, I said. Now? No laptop. No phone. Just your brain. She glanced at it, then looked back up like she expected me to laugh. Like this was some kind of hazing. You're serious? She asked. I nodded once. To her credit, she didn't argue, didn't pout or push back. She took the paper, pulled a pen from her purse, and began scribbling in the margins. But her hand was trembling slightly. Not enough for a normal person to notice. But I'm not normal, not when it comes to her. I watched in silence, pretending to check my notes while I studied every nervous movement. The way she tapped the pen against her chin, the occasional frown, the way her lips twitched when she was stuck on a word. All of it took me back to quiet mornings at our kitchen table, her solving crosswords in pen while I made coffee, before I knew she was texting him under the table. 20 minutes passed like a slow bleed. And when I finally said, time, she dropped the pen and let out a quiet exhale that almost sounded like relief or surrender. I took the paper, glanced at it, didn't read a single word, just folded it slowly and slid it back into the folder like a prop in a show that had already ended. I'll review it later, I said flatly. Was that a real test? She asked. Her voice was calm, but I could hear something underneath it. Not anger. Not yet. Just doubt. The first crack in the armor. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I stood, walked to the small mini fridge in the corner, and grabbed a bottle of water. One for me, one for her. I handed it over like a peace offering. It's not just about your answers, Marla, I said, my voice quieter now. It's about how you react under pressure. You said you've changed. I need to know what that looks like. She took the bottle but didn't open it. Is that what this is? An evaluation? I met her eyes. Isn't everything? We stood in silence for a moment that felt longer than it should have. And then she finally asked the question I've been waiting for. Are you really considering hiring me? And for a brief second, I wanted to lie, to mess with her, to say something cold or vague. But I didn't. Because somewhere between the bruised pride and the unfinished grief, there was a small flicker of something else. Not forgiveness, not even close, but maybe curiosity. So I said the only honest thing I could. I don't know. That hit harder than any rejection would have. Her lips parted slightly, then closed again, like she was swallowing words she didn't have permission to say. She stood up slowly, holding her bag against her side like a shield. Then I guess I'll wait to hear from you. And she turned to leave. But right before she reached the door, I said her name. Soft. Deliberate. Marla. She stopped. Didn't turn around. Just waited. I know he left you, I said. There was no gasp. No denial. Just the slow, heavy sound of someone breathing through a truth they thought no one knew. Then she walked out, quietly. But she didn't close the door behind her. And that was the part that bothered me most. I didn't sleep that night. I laid on my couch, not even my bed, with the TV on low volume, the blue light flickering across the ceiling like distant lightning. I kept playing the moment back. Her face when I said his name, the way she didn't deny it, didn't even pretend to be shocked. It had all been written in her silence. Ethan was gone. And for once, I hadn't had to dig for the truth. It fell into my lap with nothing but a name and a well-timed pause. But that wasn't what kept me awake. What kept me awake was that she didn't close the door. She knew what that meant. We both did. Leaving a door open, literally or figuratively, was Marla's way of asking, will you follow me? And once upon a time, I always did. I almost texted her that night. Just a period. Just enough to be noticed. I typed it, hovered over the send button, then deleted it, and threw my phone under a pillow like I was 16 again. The next morning, I came into the office early. Earlier than usual. The kind of early where the building still hums with overnight silence and the lights feel like they're apologizing for being on. I wasn't thinking clearly, not really. I had told myself I'd review her branding test. Give it a fair shot. But I didn't open the folder. Instead, I opened my email. And that's when I saw it. A message from Kendra, my HR liaison. Subject line, candidate notes, Marla Hensley. My stomach dropped. I clicked it, expecting an administrative follow-up, maybe a background check hiccup, something small. But it wasn't that. It was a forwarded email chain I wasn't supposed to see, not originally. Apparently, Kendra had mistakenly hit reply all when looping me into a conversation between her and Marla. Marla had reached out after the interview, and the message wasn't professional. It wasn't vulgar or dramatic, nothing that could get flagged or reported. But it was calculated, carefully worded in that old Marla way, soft enough to pass scrutiny, sharp enough to draw blood. She thanked Kendra for the warm welcome, said she was grateful for the opportunity to reconnect in an environment that once held so many memories. She mentioned how me, had always pushed her to think critically, and that it felt familiar but oddly inspiring to be challenged again. The message ended with a line I knew was written for me, even though it wasn't addressed to me. I believe some doors close only to be reopened when both parties are ready to walk through them. My jaw tightened. She was already playing the long game, already planting seeds, already trying to twist the situation into something poetic, something inevitable. I slammed my laptop shut. This wasn't a coincidence anymore. It wasn't some random job application. This was deliberate. She wanted back in, not just into the company, but into my life. And she was using the one system I couldn't escape: professionalism. Plausible deniability wrapped in HR language and hollow gratitude. But I wasn't that man anymore. Not entirely. So I did what I always do when I feel powerless. I called Louis. Louis is my older brother. Half-brother technically. We don't talk often. But he's the only person who knew what I looked like during the aftermath. The nights I showed up at his place smelling like whiskey and regret, asking if I could sleep on his couch just so I didn't have to see the apartment Marla left behind. He picked up after 2 rings. I didn't even say hello. She applied for a job at my company, sat in front of me yesterday like nothing happened. Louis was silent for a beat. Then, "And you didn't throw her out the window?" She didn't recognize me at first, but she did eventually. Yeah. And she's trying something. I don't know what yet. Louis exhaled. She's always trying something. You just never noticed in time. I didn't respond. Then he said something that froze me in place. Just be careful, Cal. She never knocks unless she already has a foot in the door. I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to think this was just desperation. Just bad luck. Just 2 broken people stumbling into the same room at the wrong time. But something told me it wasn't. Something told me she was orchestrating this, piece by piece, waiting for me to let her back in. And if she was building a trap, part of me was already stepping into it. Willingly. I didn't respond to the email. I didn't reply to Marla. I didn't even speak to Kendra. For the rest of the day, I avoided everyone, moved my meetings, ate lunch at my desk, turned my phone face down, and kept the blinds closed in my office like I was trying to keep out a storm I could already feel crawling up the windows. But it followed me anyway. I'd been doing so well. For years. Therapy. Structure. Long walks with headphones full of white noise and forgettable podcasts. A routine that made me feel like I wasn't constantly carrying a ghost on my back. But seeing her, talking to her, smelling that faint familiar perfume again, it split something open I thought had scarred over. I was unraveling. Quietly, professionally, but still unraveling. That night, I didn't go home. I walked. For hours. City blocks turned into miles. I passed the bookstore where I once found her crying between 2 poetry shelves. The sushi place she hated but pretended to love because I was obsessed with the tuna rolls. The bridge where I once asked her if we were okay, and she said, of course, without even blinking. I don't know how long I walked. But by the time I got back to my apartment, the streetlights were blinking tired yellow, and the world felt like it had exhaled without me. There was a letter on my doormat. A physical letter. No envelope. Just folded in half. No name on the outside. I picked it up cautiously, like it might explode. Inside, a single line. If this is about revenge, I won't play. But if it's about closure, I'll show up. There was no signature. There didn't need to be. Her handwriting hadn't changed. I stared at the paper for 10 minutes before I realized I'd been holding my breath. Then I crumpled it and tossed it across the room like that made me stronger than it did. Closure? Closure doesn't knock on your front door. Closure doesn't send cryptic letters at midnight. Closure doesn't look like the person who once kissed your forehead right before lying to your face. But still, I didn't sleep. The next morning, I found myself in the office again before sunrise, staring at the stack of papers on my desk without reading a single word. I didn't even hear the knock. She was already halfway into the room before I looked up. This time, she didn't ask permission. She just closed the door behind her and said, "I didn't write that to manipulate you." I didn't answer. She stepped closer. "I wrote it because I know how you think. I know you wouldn't confront me. You'd drown in the silence. You always did. You don't get to psychoanalyze me," I muttered. "I'm not trying to," she said. "But I'm not pretending, either." I finally looked at her. She looked tired. Real tired. Not the kind makeup hides. The kind you carry in your bones. She wasn't playing dress-up anymore. Her eyes weren't rehearsing. And somehow, that made me even more defensive. "You think we can just have some heart-to-heart and wipe it clean?" I asked. "What is this, a retroactive apology tour?" "No," she said softly. "But I think pretending none of it happened is killing you." I stood. "You don't know what it did to me." "You're right," she said, without missing a beat. "I don't. I only know what it did to me. And I live with that every day." That stopped me. Not because I believed her, but because part of me wanted to. There was a pause, not the awkward kind. The fragile kind. Like something was about to be said that couldn't be unsaid. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a flash drive. "I want you to see something." I didn't take it. "What is it?" I asked. "It's not a plea. Not a sob story. It's not even about me." She looked down. "It's about him." "Ethan." She nodded. "He wasn't who I thought he was. And I stayed longer than I should have. I have no excuses. But I need you to see why I left. And why I'm standing here now." I didn't move. She set the drive on the desk. "I won't bring this up again," she said. "I'll finish the application process like anyone else. You can throw this away if you want. But if you want to know the truth, the whole truth, it's on there." She turned to leave. And this time, she closed the door behind her. But not all the way. Just until it clicked. Not latched. Not locked. Just barely hanging on. It took me 3 hours to plug in the drive. Not because I didn't want to know, but because some part of me already did. And I wasn't sure I could survive hearing it confirmed. Or worse, disproved. I left it on the desk all morning. Sat through meetings where my mouth moved, but none of the words belonged to me. I nodded through pitches and updates while my eyes drifted back to the little silver rectangle sitting beside my keyboard like a trigger no one else could see. By noon, I was the only one left on my floor. I closed the blinds, locked the door, slid the flash drive into the port with the kind of hesitation usually reserved for detonators. It took a few seconds to load. The folder was untitled. Just a single video inside. No timestamp. No context. Just a file named "Before You Decide." I hovered the mouse. Clicked. It opened on a hotel room. Dim lighting. A cracked mirror. The kind of furniture that doesn't belong to anyone. Marla was sitting on the bed. No makeup. Wrinkled shirt. Hair tied back like she hadn't slept in days. She looked small. The version of her I never got to see. The one she always kept hidden behind curated outfits and rehearsed strength. Then a voice from behind the camera said, "Ready?" It wasn't mine. It wasn't Ethan's either. Not unless his voice had aged 10 years and lost its charm. She nodded. And then she began to talk. Not perform. Talk. What followed was 23 minutes of raw, unfiltered honesty I didn't know she was capable of. She talked about the affair. How it started. Why it started. She didn't blame me, not once. She owned every decision, every omission, every calculated lie. But she also peeled back layers I hadn't known existed. She said Ethan changed after she left me. Not suddenly, gradually. He became possessive, controlling, not physically abusive, but emotionally surgical. He picked her apart with compliments that felt like warnings. Public affection that turned into private coldness. He loved being the man she left someone else for, but hated who she actually was once he got her. She said she stayed longer than she should have because she didn't want the story to be, "I left Callum and failed." She wanted to prove something, to herself, to him, to everyone. And by the time she realized no one was watching, she was already someone else entirely. Hollow. Detached. Just a woman who burned a bridge so badly she couldn't even see where the smoke ended. Then she told a story I had never heard. About the day she found a note in Ethan's coat pocket. A name she didn't recognize. A hotel. A time. She followed him, not because she was jealous, but because she wanted it to be true. She wanted permission to leave. And when she caught him in the hallway kissing someone else, she said she felt relieved. That was the word she used. Relieved. And that was when she knew she'd been running from the wrong person all along. Not from me. From herself. The video ended with her looking into the camera for a full 15 seconds. Silent. Unblinking. Like she wanted the lens to see the pieces that even mirrors avoided. Then she reached forward and turned it off. I sat there long after the screen went black. I didn't cry. Didn't scream. I just sat. Because the truth wasn't satisfying. It wasn't some grand reveal where I got to be the hero and she the villain. It was messier than that. Human. And that made it worse. Because now I didn't know how to feel. She hadn't come back to win me. She hadn't come back to manipulate me. She had come back because there was nowhere else left to go. And whether I liked it or not, I was still the last person who ever really saw her. I pulled the drive from the computer and stared at it for a long time. Then I slipped it into my pocket. And I walked out of the building without telling anyone. Because I needed air. And silence. And maybe, for the first time in 5 years, I needed to ask myself a question I had spent too long avoiding. Do I still love her? I didn't go home that night. Not at first. I wandered the city again, retracing streets I didn't even recognize anymore. Everything had changed. The cafes, the billboards, even the skyline felt sharper, colder. But I knew that wasn't the city. That was me. I'd carried 5 years of bitterness like a shield, convinced it made me stronger, when really it had just made me quieter, harder, alone. And now I had a flash drive in my coat pocket that felt heavier than it should have. Not because of what it revealed, but because of what it undid. By the time I made it back to my apartment, the sky was turning pale with morning. I stood in front of the mirror for a long time, not fixing anything, not checking anything, just looking at myself, at the man I'd become. Then I grabbed my phone and typed a message. Just 5 words. Can we talk? Just talk. No games. No demands. No promises. She replied a few minutes later. Tell me when and where. I chose the bookstore. The one she used to escape to when life got too loud. She once told me the quiet there felt safe. I figured we could use some of that. She arrived before me, sitting near the back, nursing a coffee with both hands like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. When she saw me, she didn't smile. Not right away. Just gave me a slow nod. And that felt right. We didn't start with apologies. We didn't rehash the past. We talked about music, about work, about the weirdly warm winter, and the fact that the coffee still tasted like burnt almonds. We talked like people who remembered each other but weren't trying to rewind. Just understand. After an hour, there was a pause. The kind that used to make me panic. But now it just felt calm. Then she said, softly, I'm not asking you to erase anything. I just want you to know who I am now, not who I was then. I nodded. I don't think I ever stopped knowing, I said. I just stopped letting myself believe you could change. She looked down. And then, without planning to, without dramatics, I reached across the table and placed my hand over hers. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't a reconciliation. It was something simpler. An opening. I don't know where it will go from here. Maybe she gets the job. Maybe she doesn't. Maybe we find a way forward together. Maybe we don't. But for the first time in 5 years, I'm not holding my breath when her name appears in my inbox. And that has to mean something. Because healing doesn't always look like a clean slate. Sometimes it just looks like not closing the door all the way.